Hello friends, welcome to Charm Stories. Please subscribe to this channel and share the stories to others. By the way, to enable subtitles or captions, look for the CC icon on the video player. It will be located in the top right corner if subtitles are available. Now let's dive into the story. Maid wiped her brow, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the rag tighter. The strong scent of bleach lingered in the air, mixing with the faint smell of expensive perfume, a reminder of the luxury that soaked into every corner of the hotel rooms she cleaned. She had worked here for over 2 years, scrubbing, vacuuming, and dusting rooms of people who lived in a different world. People who probably didn't even know she existed. They passed her in the hallways, barely acknowledging her, as if she were part of the furniture, no more noticeable than the marble floors or crystal chandeliers in the lobby. Today started like any other. Maid had entered the suite of Theo Baca, a well-known billionaire, with her usual routine in mind: dust, vacuum, and get out of the room before anyone even noticed she had been there. Theo was one of those men who always seemed just out of reach. He was constantly on the move, surrounded by assistants, rarely staying in his room for more than a few minutes. But today was different. As Maid dusted the nightstand, something unusual caught her attention. Hushed voices, sharp and urgent, echoed from the adjoining room. She froze, her rag still in hand. It wasn't uncommon to hear guests talking, but something about this conversation sent a chill down her spine. She leaned closer to the door, her heart pounding. The woman's voice on the other side was unmistakable. It was Tammy, Theo's wife. Maid had seen her in passing several times, always perfectly dressed, the picture of elegance. "He'll never see it coming," Tammy whispered, her voice filled with malice. Maid's heart skipped a beat. "We'll make sure this trip is the last one he ever takes," a man responded, his voice low and icy. Maid didn't recognize the man, but the gravity of their conversation was undeniable. This wasn't just a casual exchange. This was a plot to kill Theo. Her pulse quickened. She became hyper-aware of her surroundings. The quiet hum of the air conditioner, the faint sounds from the hallway, and the thunderous pounding of her heart in her ears. She tried to convince herself to leave, to pretend she hadn't heard anything. Just go back to her life of scrubbing floors and changing sheets without getting involved. But her feet refused to move. "Darian, we need to be careful." Tammy's voice sliced through the air, colder than before. "One slip up and everything falls apart." "Darian?" Maid didn't know much about Tammy, but she knew Tammy wasn't married to anyone named Darian. This wasn't just a murder plot, it was a betrayal, a cold, calculated plan. Tammy and her lover Darian were plotting to kill Theo during his upcoming business trip, and no one knew. Maid took a shaky step back, her mind racing. What should she do? Call the police? Tell someone? But who would believe her? She was just the help, invisible to people like Tammy and Darian. And even if someone did believe her, what if they found out she had overheard? People like Tammy didn't hesitate to eliminate threats, and Maid had just become one. She found herself standing in the middle of the suite, staring at her reflection in the spotless mirror. She felt small and insignificant, but with that smallness came safety. They didn't know she had heard. They didn't know who she was. She could just disappear into the background, like she always did. She could walk out of that room and pretend nothing had ever happened. Her hands trembled as she finished dusting, her body on autopilot while her mind spiraled in 1,000 directions. Maybe Theo wasn't a good man. Most of the wealthy people she cleaned for weren't. But did that mean he deserved to die? Could she live with herself if she stayed silent? By the time she left the suite, Maid had made up her mind. She couldn't just stand by and let someone be killed. No matter how terrifying the thought was, she had to do something. Maid sat in the small employee lounge, staring blankly at the cheap cup of coffee in front of her. She could barely taste it as her mind replayed the conversation she had overheard, over and over. Tammy, Theo Baca's wife, and a man named Darian were plotting to kill Theo. What if Tammy had seen her? What if Darian knew someone had been in the room? She shuddered at the thought. Maid knew she had to be smart about this. If she went directly to Theo, he might not believe her. Worse, Tammy could find out she was involved. But Maid wasn't a coward. She didn't have much. But she had her conscience, and she couldn't let someone die just because she was scared. She needed to warn him, but in a way that wouldn't give her away. The next morning, Theo Baca arrived at the hotel lobby, just as Mommy had hoped. His presence was imposing, surrounded by his usual entourage of assistants and security. Her heart raced as she spotted him from across the room. This was her one chance to warn him. She rehearsed the words in her mind, but her palms still felt sweaty, her nerves on edge. When she finally mustered the courage, she crossed the lobby, weaving through the morning rush of guests and staff. "Mr. Baca," she called out, her voice shaky, but louder than she intended. To her surprise, Theo turned around, his sharp eyes narrowing as they scanned her, taking in her uniform and name tag. "I need to tell you something about your trip," Mommy said quickly, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't go. Something's not right." Theo raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. He glanced at her name tag again, his expression unreadable. "And why should I trust you?" His voice was cool, dismissive. Mommy swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. Why would he trust her? She was just a maid, someone invisible to people like him. But she had to try. "Please," she whispered, stepping closer, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "I can't explain everything, but please, trust me on this. Don't go on that trip." For a moment, Theo's hard gaze softened just for a second. Was it doubt? Curiosity? She couldn't tell. He straightened up, looking down at her one last time before turning away. "I'll think about it," he said over his shoulder, his tone clipped, dismissive. And just like that, he was gone. Swallowed up by the crowd. Mommy stood frozen, watching him disappear. Her heart sank. That was it. She had done everything she could, but now it was up to him. She had warned him, but what if he didn't take her seriously? What if Tammy and Damian went through with their plan anyway? The rest of Mommy's shift passed in a blur. She went through the motions of cleaning rooms, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the brief conversation with Theo, wondering what he would do. Was he the type of man to brush off such a vague warning, or would he take it seriously? Could he see the danger coming? That evening, as Mommy walked home through the bustling streets, the usual chaos of the city felt distant to her. Horns blared, street vendors called out, tourists snapped pictures, but all Mommy could think about was what she had overheard in that hotel suite. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating, as she wondered whether Tammy and Damian had already noticed something was wrong. When Mommy finally arrived at her small apartment, the silence inside was unbearable. She paced the narrow hallway, her mind racing. What if they found out it was her? What if Tammy had already figured out that she overheard their plan? The thought chilled her to the bone. She tried to push the fear away, but sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, Mommy stepped out of her building, still groggy from a restless night. As soon as she opened the door, she froze. Parked right outside was a sleek black luxury car, far too expensive for her modest neighborhood. It gleamed under the morning sun, a stark contrast to the cracked sidewalks and old brick buildings. Her heart pounded as she stared at the car. Was it just a coincidence, or was it something more? A strange feeling crept over her, and Mommy couldn't shake the sense that her life had just gotten a lot more complicated. Was someone watching her? As the car door opened, Mommy braced herself. Mommy's stomach twisted as she stood frozen in place. Who would be driving such an expensive car in her neighborhood? And more importantly, who were they waiting for? She hesitated, thinking about turning back inside, but then she saw him. The driver. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, looking entirely out of place. As he adjusted his hat, he locked eyes with her, and her heart skipped a beat. For a moment, every instinct in her body screamed for her to run. But she couldn't move. "Miss Mommy?" the man asked, his voice calm and measured. She nodded, barely able to find her voice. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crisp white envelope, holding it out to her. "This is for you," he said, his expression unreadable. Mommy's hand shook as she took the envelope, her eyes darting between the man and the car. Who sent this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The driver smiled faintly, tipping his hat. "Mr. Baca," he replied smoothly. "He wanted to make sure you received it." "Theo Baca?" Mommy's initial fear gave way to a rush of relief, quickly followed by confusion. What could he possibly want? She glanced down at the envelope, feeling the thick, expensive paper between her fingers. Her name was written in elegant script on the front. Without another word, the driver turned and walked back to the car, leaving her standing there with her heart racing. Back in her small apartment, Mommy sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope as though it might bite her. Finally, after a long pause, she slid her finger under the seal and carefully opened it. Inside was a single note, written in neat handwriting. "Thank you for your concern. I've decided to cancel the trip. Enclosed is something I believe you'll find useful." Mommy's hands trembled as she pulled out the second item from the envelope, a key. It was small and plain, attached to a silver keychain with a simple engraving, Wilshire Towers. Her brow furrowed as she stared at it. Wilshire Towers was a luxury apartment building downtown, far beyond anything she could ever afford. Why would Theo Baca send her this? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "Your new place is ready. Welcome to a fresh start, TB." Mommy blinked at the message, her mind struggling to keep up. A fresh start? Was this real? Why would Theo Baca, one of the world's richest men, give her an apartment? She had only given him a vague warning about his trip, certainly not something worth this level of gratitude. Her life had always been modest, a constant struggle to make ends meet. Now, this man, someone she barely knew, was offering her a new life. She stood up, pacing the small kitchen. This didn't feel right. There had to be more to this. Why would a billionaire care about what a maid had to say? Why had he believed her warning, and why go to such lengths to thank her? As these thoughts spiraled in her mind, one thing became clear. Her life had just changed in ways she could never have imagined. That evening, Mommy made her way toward Wilshire Towers, the key heavy in her pocket, a constant reminder of the bizarre turn her life had taken. Her steps were slow and uncertain. This all felt too surreal. Even as the towering building came into view, its sleek glass windows reflecting the fading light of the city, she still couldn't wrap her mind around it. Why would Theo Baca, one of the most powerful billionaires, give her a place like this? The words from the note echoed in her mind, a fresh start. But why? What did he want in return? As she approached the entrance of the building, the doorman greeted her with a polite nod, as if people like her walk through those doors every day. It was surreal. Mommy had cleaned enough luxury buildings to know how out of place she was here. But still, she handed him the key, watching as he typed something into the security system. "All set, Miss Mommy. Elevator to your right. Take it to the 15th floor," the doorman said, flashing a practiced smile. Mommy muttered her thanks, stepping into the sleek elevator. The doors closed with a soft whoosh, and the ride up felt endless, even though it only took a minute. Her pulse quickened with every passing floor. By the time the elevator doors opened, her palms were sweaty, and her breath came in short bursts. She stepped into the hallway, stopping in front of apartment 1504. The key turned easily in the lock, and as she pushed the door open, Mommy's breath caught in her throat. The apartment was stunning, far more luxurious than anything she had ever imagined. Hardwood floors gleamed under soft, recessed lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the city skyline. Everything was immaculate, from the sleek kitchen appliances to the modern furniture. She wandered through the space in a daze, her fingers brushing over the smooth surfaces of the counters, the soft fabric of the couch. It didn't feel real. Just a few days ago she was scrubbing floors, worrying about how she'd make rent. Now she was standing in a place like this. Suddenly Mommy stopped, a wave of uncertainty washing over her. This didn't make sense. Nothing about this situation made sense. Why had Theo Baca done this? Out of gratitude? But this was too much. Far too much for just a simple warning. What did he really want from her? Mommy sat in the plush chair, her head buried in her hands. She had warned Theo Baca. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? But now, sitting in this luxurious apartment that wasn't hers, the weight of it all was pressing down on her. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. What had she gotten herself into? Why had Theo gone to such lengths? A sharp knock on the door startled her, pulling her out of her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat as she stood, slowly crossing the room to answer it. When she opened the door, a young man stood there, holding a clipboard. He was dressed in a neat black suit, professional yet casual, and he smiled warmly when he saw her. "Miss Mommy, I presume?" he asked, glancing at the clipboard. "Yes, that's me," she replied cautiously, unsure of what this visit could mean. "Good evening, I'm Evan, Mr. Baca's assistant," he said, extending his hand. Mommy hesitantly shook it. "I've been instructed to give you a quick tour of the building, show you the amenities, and make sure you're all settled in." Mommy blinked, trying to make sense of it all. "A tour?" she echoed, still in disbelief at everything that was happening. Evan nodded, his smile unwavering. "Yes, Mr. Baca wants to ensure you're comfortable. He's very particular about his guests." The word guests lingered in Mommy's mind. That's what she was to Theo, a guest in this shiny, glamorous world that felt so far removed from her own. She wasn't sure if that made her feel better or worse. As Evan led her through the building, showing her the gym, the pool, and the private lounge areas, all Mommy could think about was how out of place she felt in this world of wealth and privilege. By the time they returned to the apartment, Mommy's head was spinning. Evan handed her a small card with his contact information and bid her a polite goodbye, leaving her alone once again. The silence of the apartment was overwhelming. Mommy sat down on the edge of the plush bed, staring at the city lights that twinkled through the window. What was she supposed to do now? Was this really her life? And what did Theo expect in return? Her thoughts spiraled again, but exhaustion soon took over. She crawled under the soft, luxurious sheets, so different from the rough ones she was used to, and sleep finally came. But it was restless, filled with fragmented dreams of danger and whispered threats. The next morning, Mommy was jolted awake by the buzzing of her phone on the nightstand. She reached for it, groggy, and blinked at the unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the answer button as her pulse quickened. "Hello?" she answered, her voice still thick with sleep. "Miss Mommy?" The voice on the other end was brisk and professional. "This is Detective Martins with the NYPD. I need to ask you a few questions regarding Mr. Theo Baca." Mommy's blood ran cold. Her heart pounded in her chest. What had happened? Why was a detective calling her? She sat up quickly, her mind racing. What is this about?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "There have been some developments," Detective Martin said, his voice steady. "I understand you've been in contact with Mr. Baca recently, and we'd like to speak with you in person. Could you come down to the station today?" Mammy's heart raced even faster. Her mind flashed back to the conversation she had overheard, Tammy's voice, whispering about the deadly plan involving Theo's trip. Was this about that? Was Theo okay? I can come in," she stammered, her throat dry. "Is Mr. Baca all right?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, long enough to send a fresh wave of panic through her. "I'll explain everything when you get here, Miss Mammy," the detective said, his voice firm but not unkind. Then the line went dead. Mommy sat frozen, staring at the phone in her hand, her stomach twisting into knots. What had happened to Theo? Was this about the murder plot? Did Tammy and Damian know she had warned him? With trembling hands, Mommy hurriedly dressed, her mind swirling with fear and questions. As she left the apartment, the key to her new life in Wilshire Towers felt heavier than ever in her pocket. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The city bustled around her as she made her way to the station. The sound of honking cars, vendors calling out, and pedestrians rushing by was almost soothing in its familiarity. But Mommy's thoughts were consumed by the terrifying possibilities of what she might face. Did Theo trust her? Was he safe? And most importantly, had she just stepped into a far bigger mess than she could ever have anticipated? As Mommy walked through the city streets toward the police station, everything around her felt off. The usual bustling noise of New York, the honking cars, the hum of life and distant chatter, was muted, almost like the world had shifted while she wasn't paying attention. Her mind was a whirl of fear and confusion, replaying the detective's words over and over again. Something had happened to Theo Baca, and it was serious enough for the police to get involved. When she entered the police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed above her, casting a cold, sterile glow over the room. The air smelled like burnt coffee and stacks of old paperwork. Mommy had never stepped foot in a police station before, and her heart pounded harder with every step. She approached the front desk, feeling out of place. "Can I help you?" the officer asked, looking up from his desk with a casual glance. "I'm here to see Detective Martins," Mommy replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The officer nodded, motioning toward a set of double doors. "Go through there, second office on the right." Her legs felt heavy as she made her way toward the office, the weight of everything pressing down on her. What if Tammy found out she was the one who had warned Theo? What if Damian was involved somehow? The questions tumbled through her mind, each more terrifying than the last. Mommy knocked lightly on the door, her hand trembling. After a brief pause, the door opened, revealing a man in his late 40s, dressed in a simple suit that didn't give much away about him. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "Miss Mammy?" he asked, motioning for her to come inside. "I'm Detective Martins." Mommy nodded and stepped into the office. It was small, with files and paperwork stacked on every available surface. Martins gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk, and she sat down, gripping the strap of her purse tightly. "Thank you for coming in," Martins began as he sat behind the desk, flipping open a folder. He looked through a few pages before meeting her eyes. "Let's get straight to the point. Mr. Theo Baca recently canceled an important trip. From what we understand, you advised him to do so." Mame swallowed hard. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made her stomach twist in knots, she admitted. "I overheard something dangerous. I thought it would be best if he didn't go." Martin's eyes narrowed slightly, his attention locked on her. "Can you explain exactly what you overheard?" Taking a deep breath, Mame began to recount everything. She told him about the conversation between Tammy and Damian. Damian she had overheard in the hotel room, the chilling way Tammy had spoken, making it clear that the trip would be Theo's last. As Mommy spoke, her heart raced faster. The tension in the room seemed to grow with each word. Martins listened intently, scribbling notes on a pad without interrupting. His face remained unreadable. When Mommy finished, he sat back in his chair, studying her carefully. "Mr. Baca canceled the trip," Damian said slowly, "and it seems that decision may have saved his life. But there's more to this story." Mommy's eyes widened in confusion. "More? What do you mean?" Martins leaned forward, his voice serious. "We believe Mr. Baca has been investigating his wife, Tammy, for quite some time. What you overheard may just be the beginning. Theo has been looking into her for financial fraud, infidelity, and now, it seems, attempted murder." Mommy blinked, her mind reeling. "He's been investigating her? Why didn't he say anything?" "Mr. Baca's been quietly gathering evidence, but until he received your warning, he didn't realize just how far things had gone," Martins explained, his expression hardening. "Your tip was the final piece of the puzzle that made him realize the danger he was in. He's been working closely with us ever since." The weight of Martin's words settled over Mame like a heavy blanket. Theo had known something was wrong all along, and her warning had brought everything to light. She sat there, stunned. What had started as a simple act of conscience, trying to warn Theo, had uncovered something much bigger than she had imagined. "What happens now?" Mame asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Martins closed the folder, his face grave. "Now, we need to move quickly. Tammy and Damian are dangerous, and they won't stop until they've achieved what they set out to do. We're working on securing evidence to make an arrest, but in the meantime, we need to ensure Theo remains safe. And you," he paused, looking her straight in the eyes, "you need to be careful." Mamie's breath caught in her throat. She had warned Theo to keep him safe, but now she realized she might be in danger too. Mommy felt an overwhelming mix of relief and dread. On one hand, she had done the right thing by warning Theo Baca. On the other hand, she was now deeply entangled in a situation more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Is he safe?" Mommy asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Detective Martins hesitated for a moment before answering. "For now, yes. We've placed him under protective custody while we gather more evidence, but we need to be cautious. Tammy Baca is not the type of woman who will go down without a fight, and her lover, Damian, is just as dangerous." Mommy nodded, her hands tightly clutching her purse. She had always known that the world of the wealthy was different from her own, but this, murder, fraud, betrayal, was something else entirely. And somehow, she had found herself caught in the middle of it. "I understand," she said, though her mind was still spinning with everything she had just learned. Darian studied her closely for a moment before leaning forward, his tone softening. "I know this is a lot to take in, and I understand that you're scared. But you did the right thing by coming forward. Mr. Baca owes you his life." His words should have been comforting, but instead, they reminded Mommy of how precarious her situation had become. If Tammy and Darian were willing to kill Theo, what would they do to her if they discovered that she had been the one to warn him? Before she could respond, Martin stood, signaling that their conversation was over. "We're going to keep an eye on things," he assured her, "but I'll need you to stay in touch. If you notice anything suspicious, if anyone contacts you, call me immediately. We can't afford to take any chances." Mommy nodded as she rose to her feet, feeling unsteady. Her legs wobbled like she was walking on air as she left the station. Her mind buzzed with everything Martins had told her: protective custody, financial fraud, betrayal. It all felt too big, too dangerous. The walk back to her apartment felt like a blur. By the time she stepped inside, her body was on autopilot. She locked the door behind her, leaned against it, and tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had done the right thing, just like Martins had said. But at what cost? Her phone buzzed suddenly, yanking her out of her thoughts. Mommy pulled it from her pocket, her breath catching when she saw the unfamiliar number on the screen. Something about it sent a chill down her spine. With shaking hands, she answered. "Hello?" A long pause followed. All she could hear was soft breathing on the other end, and then, finally, a voice she recognized all too well. "Mommy?" Tammy's voice purred through the line, sending a shiver down Mommy's spine. "We need to talk." Mommy's stomach twisted in fear. Her grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles turned white. How had Tammy gotten her number? What did she want? "You think you're clever, don't you?" Tammy continued, her tone icy now. "But you've made a big mistake. People like you don't mess with people like me and get away with it. I'll make sure of that." The line went dead before Mommy could respond, but the threat hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. She stood frozen, the phone still in her hand, her heart pounding in her chest. Tammy knew, and she wasn't going to let Mommy get away with it. Mommy's hands shook as she stared down at her phone, the dial tone still humming in her ears. Tammy's words weren't just empty threats. They felt like a dark promise. What was she going to do? Mommy began pacing her apartment, the feeling of being trapped growing with every step. The luxurious space, which had once felt like a dream come true, now felt like a cage. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound from the hallway made her jump. She couldn't escape the feeling that Tammy, or worse, Darian, could be watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. She thought about calling Detective Martins, telling him about Tammy's phone call. But what could the police really do? They couldn't guard her 24/7, and Mommy wasn't the type to run and hide. Not yet. Not until she figured out her next move and what her role was in this twisted game she'd been dragged into. Mommy knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the middle of her chaotic thoughts, a sharp knock on the door pulled Mommy back to reality. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't expecting anyone. Was it Tammy? Had she come for her already? Mommy hesitated, her hand hovering near the doorknob. After a long, tense moment, she finally gathered the courage to peek through the peephole. To her surprise, it wasn't Tammy or Darian standing on the other side. It was Theo Baca. Her heart leapt into her throat. She hadn't seen Theo since the brief encounter at the hotel, and now here he was, standing at her door, looking disheveled and tense. Without thinking, Mommy quickly unlocked the door and pulled it open. "Theo?" she breathed, her voice a mixture of relief and confusion. "What are you doing here?" Theo stepped inside, his eyes scanning the apartment before settling on her. He looked different from the polished, composed billionaire she had always seen in the media and during their brief encounters at the hotel. His hair was slightly messy, his suit rumpled, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made Mommy's heart race. "I needed to talk to you," Theo said, his voice low and urgent. "There's more to this than you know, Mommy, much more." Mommy's mind spun. What could possibly be worse than attempted murder and a web of lies? She closed the door behind him, bracing herself for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What else could there be?" Theo ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small space of the living room. "After you warned me about Tammy and Damian, I started digging deeper. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't realize just how far back this goes." He stopped pacing and turned to face her. "It's about your father, Mommy." Mommy's world froze. Her father? She hadn't thought about him in years. He had died when she was young, leaving her and her mother to struggle on their own. But what could her father possibly have to do with any of this? "My father?" Mommy echoed, her voice trembling. "What does he have to do with this?" Theo sighed, his expression softening for the first time since he'd arrived. "I didn't realize it until recently, but your father and I were close friends when we were kids. We grew up together. He was like a brother to me." Mommy's knees nearly gave out. Her father had never mentioned Theo, never spoken about any old friends or connections from his past. It had always been just the two of them, scraping by, surviving day by day. None of this made any sense. "I don't understand," Mommy said, her voice shaking. "My father died in an accident years ago. What does that have to do with Tammy and Damian?" Theo stepped closer, his expression filled with a mix of guilt and determination. "That accident wasn't an accident, Mommy. Your father was involved in something much bigger, something dangerous, and I think Tammy had something to do with it." Mommy's legs felt weak, and she sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. Her father's death wasn't an accident? Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to process everything Theo was telling her. She had always believed her father's death was a tragic, random event, but now Theo was saying it was connected to this web of deceit, murder, and betrayal. "I don't know all the details yet," Theo continued, his voice softer now, "but I found enough to know that your father was framed for something he didn't do. He got caught up in something with Tammy's family years ago. Something that cost him his life, and now it's all coming back." Mommy's head spun. Her father, framed and murdered, and now Tammy, the woman she had overheard plotting to kill Theo, was somehow connected to her father's death. The world around her seemed to blur as the weight of it all came crashing down on her. "Why didn't he tell me this sooner?" Mommy asked, her voice barely audible. Theo's eyes darkened. "I wasn't sure. I needed more proof, and honestly, I didn't want to drag you into this unless I had to. But now, with Tammy threatening you, I can't keep it from you any longer. You deserve to know the truth." Mommy sat in silence, her mind racing. Everything was connected. Her father's death, Theo's life in danger, Tammy's murderous plans. She felt like she was trapped in a nightmare, one she couldn't wake up from. But one thing was clear. She had to stay strong. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Mommy's mind raced as she tried to piece together everything. Her father had been connected to Theo Baca's world in ways she had never imagined, and now she was caught in the middle of a decades-old conspiracy. One that had claimed her father's life and now threatened hers. "What do we do?" Mommy asked, her voice small but steady. "How do we stop Tammy?" Theo's gaze hardened. "We gather evidence. We expose her for everything she's done. But it's going to take time, and it's going to be dangerous. Tammy isn't playing games anymore. She's ruthless, and now that she knows you're involved..." He didn't have to finish the sentence. Mommy understood the gravity of the situation. Tammy was coming for her, and she wasn't going to stop until Mommy was silenced for good. For a long moment, the room was filled with tense silence. Both of them were lost in thought. Mommy's mind buzzed with fear, anger, and determination. She had spent her entire life living in the shadows, struggling to survive. Never did she imagine that her past held such dark secrets. But now, those secrets were coming to light, and she had no choice but to face them head on. "I'm not gonna run," Mommy said, her voice firm. "If Tammy is responsible for my father's death, I need to know the truth. And I need to make sure she pays for what she's done." Theo nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "We'll do it together, Mamie. But we have to be careful. Tammy's dangerous, and she's got people on her side who will do anything to protect her." Mommy stood up, feeling a surge of strength she hadn't felt in days. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore, not after everything she had learned. Her father had been taken from her, and now Tammy was threatening to take even more. But Mommy wasn't that scared, invisible girl anymore. She was ready to fight. The days that followed Theo's revelation were a whirlwind. Mommy found it impossible to focus on anything else. Her job at the hotel, her usual routines, everything felt insignificant compared to the heavy truth she was slowly uncovering. She couldn't shake the thought that her father's death hadn't been an accident, but a cover-up. A murder disguised as a tragedy. And Tammy had played a role in it. But what shook her the most was realizing that she had a connection to Theo Baca that stretched back decades. She had grown up thinking she was just another faceless person in the city, scraping by without knowing that her roots were tied to wealth and power, wealth she had never known existed. Her father had kept secrets from her, and those secrets were now unraveling in the most dangerous way. Theo had been distant since their last meeting. He sent her occasional updates, but kept a low profile. The police investigation was ongoing, and Theo was working closely with Detective Martins to build a case against Tammy. But the process was slow and full of complications. Each day that passed felt like another day. Tammy was getting closer to Mommy. As she sat in her new apartment, staring out at the New York skyline, Mommy felt the walls closing in. The luxury that had once seemed like a dream now felt like a gilded cage, trapping her in a world she barely understood. She was safe here, for now, but deep down she knew it wouldn't last. A knock on the door startled her. Her heart jumped. She wasn't expecting anyone, and after everything that had happened, she was on edge. She slowly approached the door, peeking through the peephole. It was Theo. She quickly opened the door, relief washing over her. "Theo, what's going on?" "We need to talk," Theo said, stepping inside. His face was serious, worry etched across his features. "There's been a development. Martin's found something that might change everything." Mommy's heart pounded in her chest. "What is it?" Theo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Martin's found documents, records linking Tammy's family to your father's death. But it's not just about money. It goes deeper. It involves an international syndicate, and it's not just Tammy. Darian is more involved than we thought." Mommy felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that mean? How much danger are we in?" Theo's expression darkened. "A lot, but we have a chance now. With these documents, we can finally take them down. But we have to act fast before they realize we're onto them." Mommy nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'm in. Whatever it takes, I'm ready." Theo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this, Mommy. Together." If you're still here, it means you're enjoying the story. Go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.